as you can see, key account manager. Some of you might say, that's not catering. I've been immensely privileged over my years. I've spent 30 years in catering, pleasing people through food. The last 5 years I've spent in the NHS catering realm with ISS, partnership with the NHS. And it's an absolute honour to be able to do that and aid recovery of patients in food. However, those years haven't been without frustration, and I'm sure we all feel it in this room. Whether it be through specification, cost, something in the NHS catering seems to remain the same. And I started, when I was asked to do this presentation, my thought immediately went, what has to change? Or have we continued in the same vein, despite the stats and reports that would suggest that something would have? So I began to explore, and hopefully I'll challenge our thought process today in terms of what that will look like. So, starting with what we know. So I looked into some of the statistics, and I thought, I've been in catering 30 years, so let's go back 30 years. So we started off with, as a study found, that 2 in every 5 patients in 1994 were admitted at risk of malnutrition, and 2/3 of those lost weight whilst in hospital and were then discharged. Seems to be a failing there, just from the nutrition point of view from caterers. 2022, almost 30 years later, 44% of the patients were at risk of malnutrition on admission, but were still discharged. The same amount were still discharged at risk of nutrition. They still lost weight. We did see an improvement through in 2020, around the COVID year, where that was 38%, and it meant almost in 30 years, we haven't actually achieved much in trying to reduce that risk of malnutrition in patients. 2 in every 5. Fundamentally, that's around 5 million patients every year. That's too many in my eyes. So what's driving it? So we had a patient survey done where 25% of those patients were not always offered the right needs or the right food that they needed for their needs. So ISS conducted a project in the same year to try and understand that, try and understand the experience and how we'd help reduce those nutritional risks. Patients viewed the quality and the taste and the freshness as key factors in that hospital food being appealing. A desire for enhanced breakfasts and a preference for healthier snacks meeting the dietary needs. Now, that's not always the case across the trusts, and I'm quite privileged in the trust that I work in at the moment, where we're almost there with our menu, but it's been difficult. And Kat mentioned it in her presentation, that we don't have a dietetic caterer within the trust, and it's a really, really fundamental part of it. But we've been fortunate enough to be working and partnering with those dietitians that are passionate about it in the trust, and we're now almost at a point where we can deliver that menu. But in conjunction with that, how consistent is the delivery of the food we provide? Cost seems to be a big factor in that. Okay, going back to patients still being discharged. Nutritionally valuable but not appealing. Again, that's patient experience. So it's not just cost, it's also what the patient sees. If they don't find it appealing, that wonderful display that we've just had, if the food looks appealing, the patient will eat it. Again, we clearly still have too much waste going down to consistency in the delivery of the food that we provide. Despite a 13% increase in food costs, they're still under scrutiny from some of the estates team. And I just want to link that a little bit actually from Kat, and I'm going a little bit off piece with the presentation here. Yes, clinicians and dietitians and the partners need to be involved, but the estates teams hold the budget in a lot of what we do. So we need to get them involved as well, in my personal opinion. Some trusts won't entertain a hostess service due to cost. Instead, we've got cleaners delivering tea rounds. We've got nursing teams taking food orders and delivering food. What experience does that deliver? Does that drive confidence from the patient in what we're delivering so they actually sit and want to eat the food that we're providing? Importance of inpatient food in what we're doing. So, in my 5 years in the NHS, discussion of the costs are frequent. Increasing cost isn't sustainable. That's one sentence that I've had in my 5 years with it. How is it not sustainable? We need to meet those costs to meet the nutritional requirements. We can't restrict what we do with catering. It makes it fundamentally difficult for the caterers, for the partners, or anybody within trying to ensure that the patients are well fed. What's the return on investment? Patients are being discharged still malnourished. Your return on investment is a well-nourished patient, somebody going out knowing that actually what we've done is we've aided that recovery. The medicine can't work without a well-nourished and a well-fed patient. Often, any increases are rejected as unsustainable. We even had a recent inquiry, which is quite disappointing, where only in August of this year, we've had a trust approach to say, what's the cost saving if we were to move that supper service to a soup and a sandwich? It's a disappointing read. A soup and a sandwich, we know, all of us in this room as experts know, that's not nutritionally valuable to a patient. So why are we asking that question? It should never be on the table. So food costs. Looking into the ERIC data for 2023, the median cost of feeding a patient per day was £8.77. Compare that to £4.56 in 2020. Some people would sit here and say that's quite a good increase. However, let's take into consideration that national minimum wage has gone up by 31.1%. Food costs have gone up by 26%. And that's just the basis of that as well. And that doesn't include the NHS AFC costs that increase in that as well. That data is not yet available until we get to where we're going. So it just gives an indication, actually, we need to go further than that £8.77. I mean, when you look at it, one trust was delivering £15.56. I would suggest that's probably within the inner borders of the city, all the way down to £5. I struggle to understand how we can deliver 3 courses twice a day to a patient for £5. In the modern world, that doesn't seem viable. Menus don't change, only the inflation does. And that's where we need to get to. Patient experience is a big factor in what they do. So let's highlight some of the social media aspects of it. We all know the NHS is under scrutiny from the NHS from a patient experience point of view. Catering is not exempt from that. In fact, catering is very much the forefront. If anybody's seen it, there's a Facebook page called the Rate My Hospital Plate. Anybody seen it at all? Yeah. It's quite damning. Some of it's really highlighting the really good stuff that's happening in the NHS. Some of it is really, really critical. And from a catering point of view, and a partner to the NHS, I have to hold myself back from comments on it, because I know full well I'd be sat in front of my manager and director asking why I did that. But it really highlights meal quality, delivery issues. Hospitals are often named with harsh and critical comments, and I'm not going to do that today, because that'd be unfair, but it's there for everybody to see. The public, within those comments, believe that it is the contractors, ourselves, and the executives that sit at board level that are penny pinching, for want of a better word. And it really isn't that, and it's really difficult to not create an argument on Facebook, because you know full well the keyboard warriors are going to come out in abundance. But that's the view of the public, and we need to change that perception. We need to put in more work to improve that patient experience and reduce that risk. And actually, social media can help us do that. If we can get it right, and people can say, yeah, I've had a fantastic experience across the entire NHS, job done, because social media will help us do that. I'm going to show you shortly some examples of varying levels of meal quality and delivery, and I'll let you come to your own conclusions on it. Patient experience is crucial. Attractive food and presentation is critical in order to improve that presentation, but we can only do that with the correct funding. Social media can replace negative ones. Let's get there. Better quality meals could prevent patients from seeking outside food. I've put that fundamentally because one of the posts on that Rate My Hospital Plate, one patient had posted an entire week of her food in the hospital, and I have to say it wasn't very appealing to look at, but that could just be the camera angle. But the very last post that person put up was a Chinese meal that their family had brought in, and they sat on a hospital bed with a Chinese takeaway. How is that acceptable in the modern world? That might be what they're doing on the outside, but actually we need to meet that nutritional requirement to prevent them from doing that. So they sit in a hospital and go, do you know what? I've been well looked after, I've been well fed. I don't need that. because it's no good for me. It's not nutritionally valuable, but they've done it because they're hungry, because they've clearly not eaten their food. Here are some of the examples. And these are what are being delivered in our hospitals today. From the far end, you've got the good. Not necessarily because they're spending more money, but it could be because they've got a better workforce that are trained better. People making the food more appealing for the cost that they're doing. We've got the top right-hand corner there, believe it or not, is liver, even though it looks like a tongue. The bottom right is a spinach and cheese slice. I'm not sure you can make that out, but that's what's being delivered. Come to your own judgment on that. Is that cost? Is that training? Is it a combination of both? But that's the acceptable, and that's why I wanted to challenge the norm. That shouldn't be our normal. Our consistency should be somewhere towards that back end there for the good. That's what I feel we need to deliver in the NHS, and together with everybody in this room, I feel we can get there with the right discussions around the right tables. So food is medicine. The title says it all. Some of these stats are quite controversial when we get to it. The one question I did ask myself is actually, what does it cost the NHS to treat malnourished patients? We'll get to that shortly. £19 billion is spent on controlled drugs annually. So why is food not seen as medicine? That's the second largest expenditure outside the workforce within the NHS. 19 billion. Yet only 0.5%, 800 million last year, was spent on catering. It's a very tiny fraction of what we're trying to deliver to patients, and that's that's around 14 million patients a year. Doesn't quite add up. 19 billion for medicine, yet we're still not aiding that medicine and that recovery just by spending 800 million pounds. Rising food costs need to be addressed. There's no one from the government in here today, but I'm sure we can all agree those food costs will hopefully start slowing down slightly. But over the last few years, those food costs have risen quicker than any inflation rates that we can deal with. And actually, as contractors and partners, we've had to manage that and try and not put that cost back onto the NHS because it's the wrong thing to do. Simple meals like in a soup sandwich don't meet the nutritional requirements, and we've said that already. Low budgets may lead to lower quality. There isn't anything that I've seen out there that would suggest that that is the case. That's just my own personal feeling. If we don't fund it properly, are we getting the right quality meals? Are we using the right products? Are we going for cheaper products just because it meets those budgetary requirements? Patient experience, attractive and appealing meals, they're crucial, absolutely crucial. And then investment in the workforce, ensuring that our members are well trained, exceptional food presentation, delivering those last 9 yards. As I said, we've got cleaning teams delivering tea rounds. We've got clinical teams, modern housekeepers, taking orders at the point of contact. Again, because of cost restrictions, there's no discussion about having a hostess service. Those people will be your experts, they're your SMEs on sites. The clinical teams have got enough to do. You know, we need to open up those discussions more to make sure we've got the experienced staff on the floor delivering those services where we need to go. When I said that what's the cost of that nutritional, the cost of treating malnourished patients versus the cost of what we've just put up there, £23.5 billion approximately last year was spent on treating malnourished patients. Put that in contrast to £800 million spent on food. Surely we could reinvest that £23.5 billion into the food to stop that happening. The current NHS structure is outdated. Back in the 70s and 80s, we're still serving orange juice in couplets. You know, we're not moving forward with how people eat in the modern world. And actually, you know, do we go to a fridge and get a couplet out? Do we eat 2 3-course meals every day? No. So, as Kat pointed out in her presentation, do we need to then start looking at the structure of the individual requirements and what they need and change those menus and how we deliver that better but that's still going to take funding. That's still going to take the experts on the ground to deliver that. And just to finish off, I just wanted to put a bit of a call to action, really, transforming patient care through nutritional meals. So join us in revolutionizing that patient recovery, minimizing the malnutrition risk to those patients by having the right people at the right table to deliver what we need to and what we're passionate about delivering to the patients on a day-to-day basis. I feel frustrated about it over the last 5 years, and I'm sure you do. As I say, I'm very privileged to be where I am, where we can start delivering that with some of the dietetics we've got. We've got the ISS dietitian in the room today, and she's been fundamental for delivering what we need to deliver over the last 12 months. Better recovery times will lead to better health outcomes. Again, that comes down to the food. Enhanced patient experience, delicious, well-balanced meals, not a soup and a sandwich. And elevate the NHS's reputation. Very, very simple things, but let's make that difference together.